Hello, dear people. We are gathered here today to discuss books. This is going to be my summer wrap-up video where I talk about the last books that I read this summer. I have been keeping you guys somewhat updated. I think I did a midsummer reading chronicle. So now I just want to show you how I finished off my summer reading before we get into autumn, because then I will be reading very different things. I'm excited to share those as well. So I have here 8 books plus 2 audiobooks that I'm going to talk about. I don't think I'm going to go in order of how I read them. I'm going to go in order of how I feel like talking about them. So the first book that I read, which I just read last week because I picked it up in New York City from Strand Bookstore, is The Giver by Lois Lowry. I cannot say enough good things about The Giver. This book brings me to tears every time, and every time I watch the movie, I cry and I weep and I just feel so moved. It's a very emotional story. It's a children's story, so it's not that long and it's not that difficult of a read, but there is a lot packed in here. The main theme of The Giver, in a sense, is that you can't have the good without the bad. The good and the bad things in life have to come together to give you that full experience of being human. So if you eliminate pain and suffering and only experience safety and contentment and simplicity, you're missing out on a huge part of the passion and the feeling that kind of shapes human character and shapes the human experience. If you only have joy and happiness and good things in your life, you're also missing out on a huge part of what it means to be human and the vice and the virtue that comes out of us in suffering and in hard times. I was just thinking about this as I was out for a walk. Essentially in The Giver, you have this society that is conditioned to eliminate human suffering and hard things. They've taken a lot of the good things away, except the people in the society aren't even aware that these good things once existed because they have no memory of them. The Giver is the one who stores the civilization's memories, in a sense, and he passes it on to the receiver, who is this boy, Jonas, the main character of the book. Anyways, in the society, they've taken away love, sex, choice, decision, art, just all the things that really bring out passion, that bring out human differences. And these are things that can have both good and negative effects, and a lot of the times they do have negative effects and they create pain and suffering. And so the leaders of the society think, well, if we do away with them, we do away with that pain and suffering, worth it. But is it worth it? That is the big question of The Giver. That's what Jonas, the receiver, is trying to figure out. As he's receiving these memories of these things, of love, of family, but also of war, of separation, he has this sense that, you know what, these really, really difficult memories are worth having, these tears are worth shedding, if I can have these joyful things too. And yeah, you appreciate the good, you appreciate the joy, you appreciate the blessings that you have in life more when you realize that they don't have to be there, and they could be taken away, and you could be miserable instead. You could have to live without these things. So that is my plug for why you should read The Giver. If you want to get into really emotional, philosophical territory, please do read this short book. It is super high on my rec list, I will say that. And another book that I read on my trip to New York, I read it for the first time. It's an American classic, and I was blown away by this book. I loved it. I adored it. It is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This is just kind of your classic coming-of-age story. It's about a girl growing up in Brooklyn, New York City. Her family is very poor, and so they have all these negative experiences, these struggles growing up. But sort of like The Giver, there's a lot of good that comes out of a lot of the bad, and there's this really deep contrast between the struggles and the hardships of life and the small joys, the things that make it all worth it, like family connections, family love, romantic love, art, writing. The girl Frances is a writer. Anyways, this is just one of those books that I could not put down. I read it over the course of a few days. It's not a short story, but it's a wonderful story. It's a very human, emotional, relatable story. This book is just absolutely marvelous, and I highly, highly recommend A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. And if you're ever going to New York City, read it on the journey. Read it while you're in New York City or in Brooklyn. This is something that I love to do. It's just whenever I go to a place, read a book that took place in that place. or read a history book on that place so that what you're reading is connected to your surroundings. It's full immersion. It's so good. It's an incredible feeling and experience. So highly recommend that you do that. And then another New York City novel, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I did talk about this book at length in the video / the Goldfinch vlog that I made a few weeks ago. If you want to get all my thoughts, or a good chunk of my thoughts on The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, go watch that video instead. But I will say a few words here as well. Very dark, very sad, lots of tragedy. I had a queasy feeling in my gut the whole time I was reading this because I was just like, how is this somebody's life? How is somebody making these decisions? How is somebody suffering in this way? It makes me so uncomfortable, and the sufferer's worldview doesn't bring a lot of comfort. I mean, this is a very postmodern book. This boy is quite postmodern in his outlook, and I think that speaks volumes. And yeah, as a Christian, I had a hard time reading it in a sense. Not to say that Donna Tartt isn't an amazing author. She is. She is incredible. She's a genius. And this book will probably go down as a modern classic. So I do recommend that you read it because it does have intrinsic value. But it was hard for me to read. Anyways, yeah, there's so much more I could say, but just go watch my other video so I don't have to repeat myself and bore you guys to death. Ooh. I also read my first Agatha Christie novel this month, which is Death on the Nile. I have seen the film with Gal Gadot, I think, and it was so good. I loved the movie, and I'd kind of forgotten what happened a little bit because I watched the movie several years ago, so it was really good to just read the novel. I'm actually teaching this book this year as a secondary text in my ancient history course, I believe, because it's set in Egypt and it deals with Egyptian themes. This was just a really fun, fast-paced novel. Not a word is lost. I really like that about Agatha Christie. She's concise. You're just sucked into the mystery and things happen. And there you go. You have the story and it's a page turner. You don't want to put it down because you're just like, who killed Lynette Ridgway and how dare they? Reading this book makes me want to read more Agatha Christie. I'm not really a mystery novel gal. That's not what I'm looking for when I go into a bookstore. That's not what I'm pulling off my shelf. I more prefer the Crime and Punishment style mystery where I know what's going on and I'm just kind of getting inside the main character's brain. Yeah, I like those kinds of philosophical novels, psychological novels. This definitely isn't a psychological novel. It's quite simplistic when it comes to motive and deeper levels of meaning behind things. But it is a really good story, and I think that's why it made a really great movie. It's just great setting, Egypt, the Nile, glamorous characters, heavy romance, you know, all the things that people love. So I do recommend Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. Then, another book that I'm teaching this year, The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm sure I don't need to say much about this one. The Lord of the Rings is so beloved in Western culture for a great reason. This book was great. This was actually the first time that I read The Lord of the Rings. I've read The Hobbit many times. I've watched all the movies many times. But I actually have never read the Lord of the Rings series until this point, and I'm so glad I did because I found that I'm just picking up so many things that I didn't even know about Middle-earth and about the history of Middle-earth and about the backstory to the Lord of the Rings. It's all in here. I actually read this one aloud to my husband. We read it together, so before bed or in the car. I'm just here reading aloud, reading the Elvish script, you know, reading all the poems and poetry that pop up throughout the novel. And that was a lot of fun, and I think that helped me retain a lot of the backstory, a lot of the names, a lot of the places, a lot better. So I feel like I have a much better understanding of Middle-earth and of The Lord of the Rings after reading The Fellowship of the Ring. And I'm very excited to teach it and to delve into it again with my students in the next few months. This book also really makes me want to read The Silmarillion. It's more of Tolkien's histories of Middle-earth and short stories. He wrote so much about Middle-earth besides The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that nobody ever really talks about. I mean, people talk about The Silmarillion more, and to my shame, I've never read that book either. I think I'm going to buy The Silmarillion for my husband for his birthday, which is coming up, because he really enjoys getting into the lore, into the history of it all. And we have a bunch of friends who totally nerd out about Lord of the Rings as well. So I think that book is due a read. I definitely need to read it. And so hopefully my husband and I will get there eventually. We are planning on reading the two towers next together. I'm still really enjoying reading aloud. Like, it's crazy how much more I get out of it when I'm reading it aloud than when I'm just reading to myself. And when I'm reading it to somebody who I can discuss things with. And when you read Tolkien, you really appreciate his choice of words and the languages that he's built because they sound so beautiful. Like, all of the names of evil people and evil places in here, like Sauron, Saruman, Mordor, Morgoth, they sound evil, and that's totally on purpose. And all the elvish names, Lothlorien, Galadriel, Celeborn, they sound beautiful and ethereal, and that's on purpose. I love tapping into that, and I love kind of hearing the Elvish language and even the Dwarvish language as I attempt to read it in here. It's nice to sound it out and to hear it. There's something very musical about The Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth. Tolkien is just a genius. I love, love, love Tolkien, and I'm actually going to be attending a Tolkien conference at a local university this September. I'm so pumped for that. I'm hoping to bring some of my older students, probably my grade 10s. I think that they'll be able to get something out of it, even though it is a higher level of scholarship. Yeah, it'll be my first official academic conference, and I can't wait to just go there with my notebooks, listen to lectures about Tolkien and all his works and his world and his languages, and just take it all in and enjoy it. It's going to be great. So I highly recommend that you pick up The Fellowship of the Ring, that you read The Two Towers, that you read The Return of the King, and The Hobbit if you haven't, and The Silmarillion if you haven't. Like, if you're not already a Tolkien geek, you need to become one. Like, join me. It's a lot of fun. It's totally worth it. And speaking of Tolkien, I just realized I have this little image that I painted of Gandalf, Frodo, and Sam. It's just kind of like a bookmark postcard that my husband was using when he was reading The Hobbit. Frodo says, "Can you promise that I'll come back?" Gandalf says, "No. And if you do, he won't be the same." And I think the same can be said for your journey as a reader reading Tolkien's works for the first time. You're not going to come out of it the same. Oh, and there's so many more good things to talk about. I also read Anne of Ingleside by Ellen Montgomery, which is book number 6 in the Anne of Green Gables series. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that I've been working through this series with my husband. We've been reading them aloud together since spring. So we've gone through books 1 to 6. We still need to read books 7 and 8. So hopefully we can do that this fall. This was a really good book, as always. The whole Anne of Green Gables series just really warms your heart. It feels like spring and summer. They feel like warm hugs. They remind you of all the little good things in life, all the little joys. It's just an excellent series. I will say I didn't love Anne of Ingleside as much as some of the other books. In this book, Anne is raising her 6 kids, and a lot of the chapters just kind of focus on her kids, which is cool if you really want to get to know Anne's kids. But personally, I missed the old Anne. I missed the story kind of centering around Anne's eccentric character and her mishaps and her joys. So yeah, I did kind of miss that. I miss the old Anne in a sense, even though it's really cool that she's a mother and that she's raising really good and interesting kids as well. And then, dun-da-da, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is the gorgeous edition that I bought in Concord at the Louisa May Alcott house, the Orchard House, this past fall when I was there on my honeymoon. And I read through this edition and it was beautiful. The illustrations were beautiful. Little Women is just one of those books that I read like every year, just because it's one of those stories that just speaks to my heart. Like, I see myself in Jo March so much, in her as a writer, in her as a woman trying to have a career, trying to be independent, trying to, kind of keep up with men, to prove herself intellectually, to prove herself creatively. She has this strong desire to like prove herself as an artist and make a mark on the world as an artist. And I 100% totally relate to that. I also relate to the part of her that loves love and is lonely in her independence and wants to be loved and falls in love with the professor, and I relate to that kind of feminine heart of hers as well. I just love to see the bonds between the sisters, between the family. There's such good, strong family values in this book. And even though I don't have 3 sisters, I do have 3 friends who I'm super tight with, and all 4 of us are very different. We kind of are like the March sisters in a way. And so I just love to kind of see that dynamic play out, and I just love a good coming of age story. Same with The Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Like, I just love to watch young girls, especially when the writers grow up and grow into themselves, grow as artists, grow as women, grow as people, and grow as Christians. Yeah, cannot recommend Little Women enough if you've never read it for yourself. Then I read You Are What You Love, The Spiritual Power of Habit by James K.A. Smith. This was a nonfiction book. I kind of read it as part of my devotional liturgy. And kind of the main point of the book is that what you do, the habits that you have, the things that you spend your time doing, say a lot about what you love most and what your deepest priorities are. So if you are a Christian, your deepest love and deepest priority should be your relationship with God. It should be Jesus Christ. So he asks very convictingly, like, does your daily life reflect that? What does the liturgy of your daily life look like? Are you sitting down for your devotions? Are you praying and reading scripture at your meals? Are you, setting aside time to focus on your personal relationship with God? Are you also talking about God and facilitating Christian discussion with your family, with friends? That is the fruit that you should be seeing in your life if your deepest love is truly on Jesus, as it should be. And if not, then you need to repent of that, change that, ask God to work that in you, that you have this desire and love for him that frames your days. Yeah, that was kind of my main takeaway from this book. This whole conversation around habits and daily liturgies applies to everybody. Yeah, what do you spend most of your time doing? Like, what's the first thing you do in the morning? Because that says something about what you're living for. Anyways, I would recommend this book. It was perhaps a little repetitive and overdone in a sense, where I kind of just felt like I was hearing the same thing over and over again, and it got kind of boring. This book could probably be summarized in like a nice little pamphlet, and that would get the main point across, but it's a whole book, so I read through it. Okay, that is all for my physical books. We also listened to 2 audiobooks. One I listened to on the way back from the Ozarks when I was there for a teacher's conference last month, and that was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. That's one of the Jane Austen books that I never read up to that point, and I loved it, and I actually walked away thinking, this might be my favorite Jane Austen book. I liked it better than Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility and Emma, and what's the other one that I really like? Mind blanking on it right now. But yeah, Northanger Abbey was great. It had all the elements of kind of a classic Jane Austen novel, but it also took some kind of unique and interesting turns that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And I found the characters quite dynamic, quite interesting and relatable. Honestly, I think that's all I have to say about that, but it's definitely worth a listen if you have Spotify and you want to turn on an audiobook that is on the shorter side and it's also very digestible. And then the other one that I listened to, an audiobook, and confession, I'm actually not quite done, but I wanted to slip it into this video because I will be finishing it in the last few weeks of summer, is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I think I started this book a long time ago and never finished it. And I don't know why. That was silly of me because it's phenomenal. It's very, very dark. There's a lot of rage. There's a lot of, twist. Like, it's love, but it's kind of twisted and imperfect and very angry. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the name Heathcliff before. And maybe you've heard of Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, Catherine Heathcliff, whatever you want to call her, whoever you want to think about her. Yeah, it's just a very different love story for the time period, I think. It's a story of forbidden love. It's a story of miscommunication. Heathcliff and Catherine really hurt each other, even though they desperately love each other. And as a result, they do not end up together. They end up with different people, and they are not happy in those relationships, or at least they're not experiencing the fullness of love that they might have experienced if they had married each other. And then, there's death and sorrow and rage. There's a lot of talk about hell and people kind of wishing they could go to hell if it means they could have revenge on someone, or people wishing they could go to hell if it means that the person they love is there, which, if you ask me, that's problematic. But overall, I'm really enjoying the book, and I'm excited to see how it ends. I just can't believe how much these characters break the norms in terms of propriety and etiquette of that time period. Like, some of them are just mean and rude and wicked, and I'm just like, You wouldn't find this in a Jane Austen novel, that's for sure, but Emily Bronte did not shy away from these darker themes and these darker aspects of personhood. And yeah, the famous quote, "Whatever his souls are made of, his and mine are the same," comes from this book. And when I heard it, Catherine speaking of Heathcliff, I was just like, yeah, got me in the feels. Yeah, to bring this back to Anne of Green Gables, it's like they're kindred spirits, they're bosom friends, they just understand each other because they are the same in some really fundamental way. And you can totally see that in Catherine and in Heathcliff, and so that makes their story very interesting as it plays out. Yeah, I definitely have people in my life who I could say, whatever his or her souls are made of, his and mine are the same, hers and mine are the same. It really is a treasure when you find those people, and do whatever it takes to keep those people in your life. Don't mess it up like Catherine and Heathcliff did. Alright, so that brings me to the end of my summer reading wrap-up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you took away some book recs. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe and stay tuned for more videos of me talking about books, more videos of me talking about teaching history and teaching literature, more videos of me doing my master's in history. My life is going to get really exciting in September, so if you're interested in following along, please do subscribe. I really appreciate your support. I appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk about books with me. It's awesome. And I also do have memberships available on my channel. If you're interested in supporting me that way, I would really appreciate it. If not, totally cool. I love to just know that you're here and that you appreciate books. And that, yeah, somehow we appreciate the same things. And maybe we are kindred spirits that way. Anyways, I will stop rambling and I will say goodbye until next time. Thanks again for watching, guys.